I just found out I'm having a girl. Congratulations. What can I do to raise her to think for herself and not fall into the modes of thinking proposed by popular culture? Well, you can let her think for herself when she's a kid. What you do is so that she practices doing that. And so that means to consciously encourage as much autonomy as possible. So how do you do that? Well, let's say she's a little kid, she's 3, and she starts to get interested in clothing. So you lay clothing out on the bed and you say, well, you can wear this or you can wear this. You let her make autonomous decisions. And with kids, you don't want to let them choose from an infinite menu. You want to give them a constrained menu. But what you want to do with your daughter is allow her to make as many decisions as she can possibly make as early as possible. And that doesn't mean that children always know what's best for themselves or any nonsense like that. It just means that you're going to encourage her autonomy in every measure that you can manage. And that means you're going to have to be brave and allow her to subject herself to a certain number of risks. So you raise her to think for herself by letting her think for herself. And that can start quite early. I would say when she's a teenager, she's going to fall into the modes of thinking proposed by popular culture because that's part of being enculturated and socialized. It's virtually inevitable, and it's even somewhat desirable. But what you hope is that you've encouraged the capacity for autonomous thinking to a sufficient degree that it's likely to integrate with that more intense teenage socialization and then reemerge, so you get someone who comes out the other side as an autonomous individual. And that works with boys and girls. So I guess you do what Geppetto did in Pinocchio. Is the first thing you decide is, well, you don't want to raise a puppet. You want to raise an autonomous person. And then you think through, well, what does it mean to be an autonomous person? What sort of person do you want your child to be? What sort of person do you want to encourage your child to be? And then having established that vision in mind, that's going to guide your choices. But at least you're making the right choices. You don't want someone who's dependent and whiny and cringy and more frightened than they need to be, and martyr-like and vengeful and malicious and manipulative and mendacious, all of those things. You want someone who can make their own judgments. And you can ask kids what they think pretty damn early. Like, you have to be careful and not push them beyond their capacity. But if you know your child, you'll be able to see what level of decision-making they're capable of engaging in. And then you would encourage them to mature as rapidly as they can. And that also means that you have to not allow yourself to fall too in love with the dependent and needy creature that your infant will be to fulfill your own emotional needs. You want to detach and encourage to mature as rapidly and as comprehensively as possible. And that will work. And some of that is negotiation with your child. You find out what they think. It's like, what do you think about this? What do you think about who should do the work in the house? How should we split it up? Like, they can be engaged in the decision-making process at a very early age. And part of that encouragement is going to be reflected in your implicit attitude that the child is a real person who's capable of imposing their will in a realistic sense in the world, on the world, and doing that in a competent and competent and confident manner. So, but at least the beginning is the desire to do that. You want to raise a confident, autonomous, courageous, truthful person. And then you reward them when they're like that. And you notice it and you tell them, good work. You did that right. Keep it up. That's the right thing. And you tell them why, what they did was right, in a detailed way. And that's very powerful. You wait and you lurk and you wait for something that you want to have happen, and you say, yes, well, we'd like to see a lot more of that good work. You do that with yourself and with your partner too. It's a very powerful technique. All right.